9 out of 10 companies have deployed AI in at least one business function, but surprisingly, 94% actually report no significant business value. And to be honest, every team that I've worked with is going to show you some slide of some AI project they've implemented and have gotten so much value from. And usually the math on that slide actually checks out. There's real math to it in terms of what the expected gains are. But then when you look at the financials 6 months to a year later, you see almost absolutely nothing. And so in here, let's deep dive into this problem, starting with first how AI ROI is typically calculated. Then we're going to go through this essentially AI realization problem where you're going to have realized gains versus unrealized gains. And then lastly, we're going to have to talk about the business layer, as there are some business models that unfortunately actively prevent AI efficiency gains. Now, IBM breaks down ROI into two major buckets, hard ROI and soft ROI. So hard ROI is those quantifiable stuff, right? This is labor cost reductions from hours saved. This is operational efficiency. This is additional revenue from AI-powered products. Now, soft ROI is harder to pin down, right? There's better decision making, there's better employee satisfaction, maybe customer experience improvements. Now, in practice, I'm just going to tell you most AI use cases end up reducing labor costs. But now let's walk through how this math typically works on the AI project level, and I'm going to use an example for this. So let's say that you're a professional services firm, and you either internally or work with a vendor to create a contract review application. Now let's say this contract before took 5 hours, but now it only takes 1 hour with all these new AI capabilities. Now the ROI is typically calculated like this. First, there's the time saved, so that's 4 hours, maybe you have 50 contracts, so that's 200 hours per month that's saved. Then you have labor savings, so that's 200 times 150, so that is $30,000 a month, $360,000 a year. Now, obviously, implementing costs as well. So this would be $200,000 for engineering implementation, maybe this is the vendor costs. Now, obviously, these AI applications are not free. You're burning tokens, maybe you're doing usage on the cloud. And so here, this maintenance and also runtime is going to be $60,000. So here, your first net year of value, and that's going to leave you with $100,000. So your ROI here is 100,000 divided by 260, and that's a 38% ROI. Now this is how every consulting firm or vendor pitches this. Now you're probably noticing that the issue with this is that we're assuming that all of those freed hours that we saved actually turn into real money for the company. And this here is what I would call the realization problem. Now for context, this is actually happening everywhere. McKinsey's State of AI survey found that companies are reporting use case level costs and revenue benefits, but just 39% report any EBIT impact at the enterprise level. And the project level math still checks out, but the enterprise level isn't. So let's go back to our contract review example. You saved 200 hours a month, 4 hours per contract, and this is completely legitimate, but your lawyers are salaried, and so they still come to work and they still get paid. And so now we need to look at what to actually do with this additional capacity. Now there's only 3 real ways of actually capturing value. First is that you redeploy these. And so here your contract reviewers are spending those 4 hours on potentially client advisory, maybe some business development, and these are new work streams that are generating value. The second is scale volume here. Here we should be able to actually handle more contracts without adding on additional headcount. So there's the same team with 3x throughput, and the revenue grows, but the cost is staying flat here. Now lastly is right sizing, and this is obviously just reducing headcount to match the new workload. Now there's one caveat for each of these. On redeploy, for instance, if you actually move things to more higher quality work, that work is probably more limited and already right-sized accordingly. So if we end up saving that, it's actually harder to move resources. On the scale volume, this actually requires more different parts of the business. In this case, probably more of a sales issue. That's probably not even on your team itself. And for right sizing, obviously, if you implement an AI use case and there was a reduction in headcount, internally you're going to get more pushback on future AI use cases. Now, all in all, you'll actually see that most organizations actually end up doing none of these, and they end up just not hiring more people. So let's just say that you actually did do all the things I talked about in step 1. You redeployed capital, you freed up that time. Unfortunately, some business models, they actually hinder you from taking efficiency gains and turning them into profit. Now, let's go back to our professional services example. What if they ended up billing hourly? See, AI just made the contract review 5 times faster, so now you actively cut your revenue model. Now, some teams and organizations are actually moving away from this model now. We're seeing this play out pretty heavily in legal, for instance. And it made sense historically, as if the scope shifted or it was unclear. Billing by the hour, in this case, ended up shifting that risk onto the client. And so now in the age of AI, it's completely removing that uncertainty. And so, candidly, a lot of these firms here are just moving to fixed pricing now. Now, again, this isn't just law, it could be consulting, it could be any professional services firm that's billing time as revenue. Now, I'm using a very broad example here, but this unfortunately does show up in a lot of different pieces across your organization, even internally, that you may not be aware of. Now, at the end of the day, The only real way to get actual EBIT, to get actual value from your applications, is to plan for what happens after the model's already been implemented. See, you may have reduced the time, you may have redeployed it, maybe your business model needs to actually be changed. And so here you need to plan ahead before your AI initiative is even implemented to make sure that it's aligned with your business goals.